Imagine a man who believed entire peoples could be placed on a ladder. At the top, himself. At the bottom, millions he had never truly known. His words would shape how empires ruled, how children were schooled, and how some lives were valued more than others. In 1902, Charles Eliot became commissioner of the East Africa Protectorate, today's Kenya. When he resigned 2 years later, he wrote a massive book, The East Africa Protectorate, 1905. But this was no travel diary. It was a blueprint, a manifesto wrapped in maps and numbers, and beneath it, a chilling idea. Race decides destiny. Eliot ranked humans like specimens in a jar. Europeans at the top. Indians just below. Arabs, then the so-called Hamites, Somali, Aramo, Renil, Bana, Bantu, and Niotic peoples near the bottom. Even the founders of Uganda, he claimed, had Hamite blood. Eliot used the word Negro constantly, yet he never defined it. He excluded the Somali and Aramo, called them Hamites, but he seemed to include the Bantu. The lines were blurry, and that's the point. They were invented. What happens when imaginary lines control real lives? These racial myths became policy. They shaped schools. They shaped land ownership. They shaped who could be trusted and who could be ruled. Children grew up learning they were less. Leaders were chosen based on skin, not skill. But history is not destiny. New voices rose. Writers, teachers, revolutionaries. They tore down Eliot's ladder, rung by rung. They proved greatness has no color, and intelligence has no race. Every empire has its myths, but myths only last if we forget to question them. But the story didn't end with Eliot's pen. It was only beginning. After Charles Eliot resigned in 1904, his theories seeped like invisible ink into the bones of British East Africa, a region that would one day fracture into Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Colonial officers began to act as if race were law. They mapped the land and mapped the people. Tribes became ethnic groups. Lineages became races. And identity became something you carried like a passport or a chain. The British Colonial Office declared that only advanced races could own fertile highlands. So settlers took the green hills, while the so-called inferior were pushed to dry, stony margins. Schools divided children by blood. European schools with books and science. Native schools with hammers and shovels. Even dreams were segregated. And yet, a strange thing happened. The more they tried to confine people, the more the human spirit slipped through the bars. In Uganda, thinkers like Ignatius Masati began whispering of self-rule. In Kenya, a young clerk named Jomo Kenyatta quietly gathered the stories of his people, the Kikuyu. And across Tanganyika, farmers and workers rose in secret strikes. They were called ungrateful, uncivilized, unready. But they were learning something powerful. That oppression can teach unity, and silence can plant revolutions. By the 1950s, the empire trembled. The lesser races rose, not with bloodlines, but with courage. They tore down the ladders. They burned the labels. They claimed back their names. And when the flags of empire finally fell, those whom Eliot had written off stood among the founders of nations. The lesson was written in fire. No one can rank the human soul, but their ideas often survive them. Quiet, invisible, unspoken, yet everywhere. After the flags of the British Empire came down, new nations rose across Africa. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, each one scarred, yet determined. But the old hierarchies didn't die. They simply changed costume. Schools still praised European civilization as the gold standard. Passports from the global south carried less power than those from the old empires. Trade rules favored the north. Scholarships, media, even beauty standards whispered the same old myth, that some people were born to lead and others to follow. It was Charles Eliot's ladder, broken, buried, but still shaping the sky. And yet, a new generation is rising. They carry smartphones instead of spears. They tell their own stories, on their own terms. On TikTok, on YouTube, in classrooms and parliaments. They remix history. They reclaim languages. They refuse to be developing, because they are becoming. Writers from Nigeria, coders from Rwanda, filmmakers from Kenya, are shattering stereotypes line by line, frame by frame. And every time they tell their stories, the old myths crack a little more. Because history isn't just what happened, it's who gets to tell it. And now, the lions are learning to write. Until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter.
If you want to uncover more of Africa's hidden history, to see how this continent was divided by invisible walls and foreign boundaries, and to finally hear the stories they never wanted you to know, subscribe now to Newspaper Tales, because the past is not dead and the next chapter is about to begin.